Have you ever stood at someone's grave and had your entire world turned upside down in an instant? Have you ever felt your heart stop beating as you realize that the person standing just a few feet away from you holds the power to destroy everything you've built, everything you've fought for, everything you love? Well, that's exactly what happened to me on a cold Tuesday morning in November, and I'm going to tell you every single detail of that day because it changed my life forever. And maybe, just maybe, my story will resonate with someone out there who's going through something similar or who needs to understand that life doesn't always follow the script we write for ourselves. My name is Daniel. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a single father to the most beautiful 4-year-old boy you've ever seen, a child named Lucas, who has his mother's eyes, her smile, her gentle spirit, and every single day when I look at him, I see her. I feel her presence. I remember every moment we shared together, even though she's been gone for almost 3 years now, taken from us by a cruel disease that didn't care about our dreams, our plans, or the future we were supposed to build together. Sarah was the love of my life, my soulmate, my everything, and I met her in the most unexpected way possible, at a small coffee shop in downtown Portland where I was working as a barista while trying to finish my degree in graphic design, struggling to make ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck, dreaming of a better future but not really knowing how to get there. She walked in one rainy afternoon, soaking wet, her dark hair plastered to her face, her clothes dripping water all over the floor, and she looked so vulnerable, so lost, so different from the confident, put-together people who usually frequented that place. And something in my chest tightened. Something told me that this woman was going to change my life, though I had no idea just how much or in what ways. I offered her a towel, made her a hot chocolate on the house, and we started talking, and I swear to you, I've never felt such an instant connection with another human being in my entire life. We talked for hours that day, about everything and nothing, about our dreams and fears, about the books we loved and the movies that made us cry, about our childhoods and the things that shaped us into who we were. And when she finally left, she gave me her number, and I remember standing there holding that small piece of paper with her handwriting on it, feeling like I'd just been given the most precious treasure in the world. We started dating, and it was magical. Absolutely magical. The kind of romance you read about in novels or see in movies but never think will happen to you. And for 6 months, I was happier than I'd ever been, completely and utterly in love, believing that I'd found my person, the one I was meant to spend the rest of my life with. But Sarah had secrets. Secrets she kept locked away deep inside her heart. Secrets that would eventually tear us apart and reshape our entire future. She never talked about her family, always changed the subject whenever I asked about her parents, became distant and withdrawn when I suggested meeting them, and I noticed this pattern, but I didn't push. I figured she'd tell me when she was ready, that everyone has parts of their past they're not comfortable sharing, and I loved her enough to wait, to give her the space she needed to open up to me. Then one day, about 7 months into our relationship, she showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m, her face pale, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she told me she was pregnant, that we were going to have a baby, and I saw the fear in her eyes, the absolute terror, and I didn't understand why she wasn't happy, why this news that filled me with joy and excitement seemed to be destroying her from the inside out. I held her in my arms that night, told her everything would be okay, that we'd figure it out together, that I loved her, and I'd love our baby, that we'd make it work no matter what challenges we faced, and she cried even harder, sobbed against my chest like her heart was breaking, and she whispered something that I didn't fully understand at the time. She said, "You don't know what you're saying, Daniel. You don't know what this means, what it will cost us." I should have asked more questions, should have demanded answers, should have pushed her to explain what she meant by those cryptic words, but I was young and naive, and so deeply in love that I thought love could conquer anything, that as long as we had each other, nothing else mattered. The pregnancy was difficult, both physically and emotionally, and Sarah seemed to withdraw further into herself with each passing week, becoming a shadow of the vibrant, laughing woman I'd fallen in love with. And I tried everything I could think of to bring her back, to make her smile, to ease whatever burden she was carrying, but nothing worked, and I felt helpless, watching the woman I loved suffer and not knowing how to help her. She refused to let me come to her prenatal appointments, said she preferred to go alone, and when I protested, she became so upset, so agitated that I backed down, told myself I was respecting her boundaries, her need for independence, when really I should have seen it as the red flag it was, should have recognized that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Our son was born on a snowy December night, and the moment I held Lucas in my arms, looked into his tiny, perfect face, felt the weight of him against my chest, I knew that my life had changed forever, that I would do anything, sacrifice anything, to protect this child, to give him the best life possible. And Sarah looked at us with such sadness in her eyes, such profound sorrow, that it broke my heart all over again. She told me she loved me, told me she loved our son but that she couldn't stay, that her family would never accept us, that her father was a powerful man who would destroy us if he knew about Lucas. And I begged her not to leave, pleaded with her to trust me, to let me fight for us, but she was adamant, her decision made, and 2 weeks after Lucas was born, she packed her bags and walked out of our lives, leaving me alone with a newborn baby and a shattered heart. Have you ever felt so completely abandoned, so utterly lost that you didn't know how you were going to survive the next 5 minutes, let alone the rest of your life? That's how I felt watching her drive away, knowing I might never see her again, knowing our son might grow up without his mother, and the pain was so intense, so all-consuming, that I literally couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't function beyond the basic necessities of caring for the tiny human who depended on me for everything. But I didn't give up. I couldn't give up because Lucas needed me, and I threw myself into being the best father I could be, learning everything I needed to know about babies and toddlers, reading every parenting book I could get my hands on, joining support groups for single parents, building a life for us even though my heart was broken, and I missed Sarah every single second of every single day. Then, 8 months after she left, she came back, showed up at my door looking thin and tired and sick, so incredibly sick, and she told me she had cancer, stage 4, that the doctors gave her maybe a year if she was lucky, maybe 6 months if she wasn't, and she wanted to spend whatever time she had left with us, with me and Lucas. And I let her back in without hesitation, without conditions, because I still loved her, had never stopped loving her, and I wanted our son to know his mother, to have memories of her even if those memories would be brief and bittersweet. Those months with Sarah were both the most beautiful and the most painful of my life. Watching her play with Lucas even when she was exhausted, listening to her sing him lullabies in a voice growing weaker by the day, holding her at night when the pain became unbearable and she couldn't sleep, knowing that every moment together was bringing us closer to the inevitable goodbye that I wasn't ready for, would never be ready for. She still wouldn't tell me about her family, said it didn't matter anymore, that the only thing that mattered was the time we had left, and I respected her wishes even though it frustrated me, even though I wanted to know everything about her, wanted to understand the secrets she'd kept locked away for so long. Sarah died on a warm spring morning, with me holding her hand and Lucas sleeping peacefully in his crib in the next room, unaware that his mother was slipping away, leaving us forever, and her last words to me were, "Take care of our baby, Daniel. Protect him from my father. Promise me you'll keep him safe." And I promised even though I didn't fully understand what I was promising, didn't know who this mysterious father was or why she was so afraid of him. The grief nearly destroyed me, but I had Lucas, and he needed me to be strong, needed me to keep going to create a stable, loving home for him. And so I did. I survived. I adapted. I learned to live with the gaping hole in my heart where Sarah used to be, and I built a good life for us. A simple life maybe, but a happy one, filled with love and laughter and all the things that make childhood magical. 3 years passed. 3 years of building memories with Lucas, watching him grow and learn and become his own little person. And I thought I was doing okay. Thought I'd found a way to move forward, while still honoring Sarah's memory, still keeping her alive in our hearts and in our daily conversations because I wanted Lucas to know his mother, to understand that she loved him even though she wasn't here anymore. I told him stories about her constantly, showed him pictures, described her smile and her laugh and the way she used to dance around the kitchen while making breakfast, and he absorbed every word, treasured every detail, and sometimes he'd ask questions I couldn't answer, questions about her family, about why he didn't have grandparents like the other kids at his preschool, and I'd deflect, change the subject, because I didn't know how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. Then came that Tuesday in November, a day that started like any other, with Lucas bouncing on my bed at 6 in the morning, giggling and asking for pancakes, and I made him breakfast, got him dressed in his favorite dinosaur shirt, and told him we were going to visit Mommy, going to take flowers to her grave like we did every month, and he was excited, chattering away about what he wanted to tell her, the new things he'd learned at preschool, the picture he'd drawn for her that was currently stuck to our refrigerator with alphabet magnets. We drove to the cemetery, a peaceful place on the outskirts of the city with rolling hills and ancient oak trees that provided shade in the summer and looked hauntingly beautiful when their leaves changed color in the fall, and Lucas held my hand as we walked to Sarah's grave, carrying the bouquet of white lilies I'd bought at the flower shop, her favorite flowers, the ones I brought her every single month without fail. As we approached her headstone, I saw him, a tall man in an expensive suit standing at Sarah's grave, his back to us, his shoulders shaking slightly, and my first thought was that we'd accidentally intruded on someone else's grief, that maybe this was a friend or colleague of Sarah's that I'd never met, and I was about to turn around to give this stranger his privacy, when Lucas tugged on my hand and said in his clear, high voice, "Daddy, who's that man at Mommy's grave?" The man turned around, and I saw his face, saw the tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, saw the shock and recognition in his eyes as he looked at Lucas, and I just knew, even before he spoke, even before he said the words that would confirm my worst fears, I knew exactly who this man was and why Sarah had been so terrified, so desperate to keep her family separate from the life we'd built together. He was in his early 60s, distinguished looking with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, wearing what I estimated was a $10,000 suit, and he carried himself with the unmistakable air of someone who was used to being the most important person in any room, someone who wielded power and influence like weapons, and when he spoke, his voice was cultured and controlled, but with an underlying current of barely suppressed emotion that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You must be Daniel," he said, his eyes never leaving Lucas, studying my son with an intensity that made me instinctively step in front of the boy, putting my body between them, a protective barrier against this stranger who somehow knew my name, who was looking at my child like he was seeing a ghost. "And this," he continued, his voice breaking slightly, "this must be my grandson." The world tilted sideways and I felt like I couldn't get enough air into my lungs, like someone had punched me in the stomach and knocked all the breath out of me, and I reached for Lucas, pulled him close against my leg, feeling his small arms wrap around me trustingly, completely unaware of the bombshell that had just been dropped, the revelation that was currently rewriting everything I thought I knew about Sarah's life, about the secrets she'd kept, about why she'd been so afraid. "I don't know who you are," I managed to say, my voice coming out steadier than I felt, "but I think you need to leave." He shook his head, pulled a wallet from his jacket pocket, extracted a business card and held it out to me, and I saw the name embossed in raised letters, Marcus Wellington III, CEO of Wellington Global Enterprises, and underneath that, a list of titles and credentials that meant nothing to me except that this man was exactly what Sarah had warned me about, exactly what she'd spent her life trying to escape. "I'm Sarah's father," he said unnecessarily, because I'd already figured that out, already put the pieces together, already understood why she'd been so secretive, why she'd left, why she'd made me promise to protect Lucas from him. "I've been looking for her for 5 years and now I find out she's been dead for 3, and I have a grandson I never knew existed." His voice was accusing, angry, like this was somehow my fault, like I'd deliberately kept Lucas from him, and I felt my own anger rising to match his, felt the protective instinct that every parent knows surging through my veins like fire. "Sarah had her reasons for not telling you," I said sharply, keeping my voice low because Lucas was listening, absorbing every word even if he didn't understand what was happening. "She made her choices and I respected them, and I'm going to continue respecting them now." Marcus Wellington looked at me like I was an insect he wanted to squash, his expression cold and calculating, and I could see him evaluating me, sizing me up, determining whether I was a threat or simply an obstacle to be removed, and I lifted my chin, met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "My daughter ran away from home when she was 23, he said, his tone conversational now, almost pleasant, which was somehow more terrifying than his earlier anger. "She left behind everything, her family, her inheritance, the life she was born to live, all because she disagreed with some of my business practices, because she was too idealistic, too naive to understand that in the real world, you have to make difficult choices. You have to do things that might seem harsh but are necessary for success. I wanted to interrupt, wanted to defend Sarah, wanted to tell him that his daughter had been brave and principled and had chosen love and integrity over money and power, but he kept talking, his words flowing like a rehearsed speech, like he'd been planning what he'd say if he ever found her again. I hired private investigators to find her, Marcus continued, moving closer, and I instinctively backed up, keeping Lucas behind me, positioning myself between my son and this man who was technically his grandfather, but felt like a threat, a danger that I needed to neutralize or escape. They tracked her to Seattle, then Portland, but she was always one step ahead, always moving, always hiding, and eventually the trail went cold, and I thought I'd lost her forever, thought I'd never see my daughter again, never have the chance to make things right between us. His voice caught, and for just a moment I saw genuine pain flash across his face, real grief for the daughter he'd lost, and I felt a tiny spark of sympathy before I ruthlessly stamped it out, because this man had driven Sarah away, had created a home so toxic, so controlling, that she'd chosen poverty and uncertainty over staying with her family, and that told me everything I needed to know about Marcus Wellington III and his idea of paternal love. "She's gone now," I said, my hand resting on Lucas's shoulder, feeling him pressed against my leg, his little body warm and solid and real, the most important thing in my entire world. And she left Lucas in my care, trusted me to raise him, to protect him, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I turned to leave, to take my son and get as far away from this cemetery and this man as possible, but Marcus spoke again, his voice sharp and commanding, the voice of someone who was used to being obeyed without question. "You're making a mistake, Daniel," he said, and there was a warning in his tone that made my skin crawl. "I'm a billionaire. I have resources you can't imagine, lawyers who could tie you up in court for years, private investigators who could find out every secret you've ever had, and I will fight for custody of my grandson. I will do whatever it takes to bring him into my family where he belongs, where he can have the life he deserves, the opportunities that you, with your minimum wage job and your tiny apartment, could never provide for him." The words hit me like physical blows, each one designed to wound, to make me feel inadequate, to make me doubt myself and my ability to give Lucas a good life. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt that old, familiar fear creeping in, the fear that had haunted me since the day Sarah left, the fear that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't do this alone, that my son deserved better than what I could give him. But then Lucas squeezed my hand and looked up at me with those big brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, full of trust and love and absolute faith that I would protect him from anything and anyone, and I felt my spine straighten, felt my resolve harden into something unbreakable, felt the love I had for this child surge through me like a tidal wave, washing away every doubt, every fear, every insecurity. "Money doesn't make you a father," I said quietly, but with absolute conviction, looking Marcus Wellington straight in the eye. "Being there does, showing up every single day does, loving your child more than you love yourself does, and I've been doing that since the day Lucas was born, and I'll continue doing it until the day I die, and no lawyer, no judge, no amount of money is going to change that." The confrontation at the cemetery stretched on, tension crackling in the air between us like electricity before a storm, and I could feel Lucas growing more confused, more upset, sensing the conflict even if he didn't understand the details. And I knew I needed to end this, needed to get him away from here, away from this man who was looking at my son like he was a prize to be won, a possession to be acquired rather than a living, breathing child with feelings and needs and a bond with the only parent he'd ever really known. Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times and showed me something that made my blood run cold. A photograph of my apartment building, clearly taken recently, and then another photo of Lucas's preschool, and another of the coffee shop where I sometimes took him for hot chocolate on Sunday mornings. And the message was clear. He'd already been investigating us, already knew where we lived and how we spent our days, and the invasion of privacy was so complete, so violating, that I felt physically ill. "I wanted to do this the civilized way," Marcus said, his voice cold now, all pretense of grief or grandfatherly affection gone, replaced by the ruthless businessman who had built an empire by crushing anyone who stood in his way. "I wanted to talk to you. to negotiate an arrangement that would allow me to be part of Lucas's life. But you've made it clear that's not going to happen. So now we'll do this my way. Through the courts, through legal channels that will examine every aspect of your life, your finances, your fitness as a parent, and we'll let a judge decide where my grandson belongs. I felt panic rising in my chest, threatening to overwhelm me because I knew he was right about one thing. He had resources I couldn't match, power I couldn't fight, and the legal system often favored blood relatives, especially blood relatives with unlimited money for lawyers. And what chance did I have, really? A single father with a modest income and no family support, against a billionaire with connections and influence that probably reached into courtrooms and judges' chambers. But I also knew something Marcus didn't, something Sarah had taught me during those last precious months we had together, that love was stronger than money, that integrity mattered more than power, that the bonds forged through shared struggles and daily sacrifices were more real, more lasting, than anything that could be bought or legislated. Do what you have to do, I told him, my voice steady despite the fear churning in my gut. But Lucas is my son, and I'm his father, and nothing you do, nothing you say, nothing you threaten is going to change that, and I will fight you every step of the way. I will use every resource I have, every favor I can call in, every ounce of strength I possess to keep him safe and keep him with me where he belongs. Marcus looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and then he did something unexpected. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted weakness in his prey, who knew exactly how to exploit that weakness to get what he wanted. "You really loved her, didn't you?" he said, and his voice was almost gentle now, which was somehow more disturbing than his earlier threats. Sarah always did have a gift for making people love her, for inspiring loyalty, even when she was being completely irrational and throwing away everything I'd worked to build for her. I didn't respond, didn't give him the satisfaction of confirming what he already knew, just stood there with my hand on Lucas's shoulder, waiting for whatever would come next, bracing myself for the next attack, because I knew Marcus Wellington didn't make idle threats, didn't bluff or posture. He made calculated moves designed to achieve specific results, and everything he'd said and done in the past 15 minutes had been leading to something, building toward a moment of leverage that he would exploit ruthlessly. "I'm going to tell you something about my daughter that you probably don't know," Marcus continued, moving around Sarah's grave, his fingers trailing across the marble headstone like a caress, and I saw genuine emotion in his eyes again, a complicated mixture of love and regret and anger that made him seem almost human for a moment. Sarah had a trust fund, set up when she was born, worth approximately $50 million, accessible when she turned 25, and she never claimed it, never even acknowledged it existed, left all that money sitting in an account gathering interest, because she was so determined to prove she didn't need her family, didn't need my help, could make it on her own. He paused, letting that information sink in, watching my face for a reaction, and I felt shock ripple through me because Sarah had never mentioned any of this, had let me struggle to pay our bills, had watched me work 2 jobs while she was pregnant, had accepted our tiny apartment and second-hand furniture without ever revealing that she had access to a fortune that could have changed everything. "That money now belongs to Lucas," Marcus said, his voice taking on a businesslike tone, the tone of someone about to make a deal. "As Sarah's only child, her heir, he's entitled to the full amount, plus the additional interest that's accumulated over the past 9 years. We're talking about close to $60 million, money that could send him to the best schools, give him opportunities you could never dream of providing, set him up for a life of comfort and security." I felt Lucas shift against my leg, felt him looking up at me with confusion in his eyes, and I put my hand on his head, ran my fingers through his soft hair, the same gesture I'd made 1,000 times before when he was scared or uncertain, and I tried to project calm, tried to show him that everything was okay even though my entire world was spinning out of control. "I don't want your money," I said flatly, because it was true, because money had never been what mattered to me, what drove my decisions, what determined my worth or my son's worth. "Lucas has everything he needs. He has love and stability, and a father who would die for him, and that's worth more than all the millions in the world." Marcus laughed, but it was a bitter sound, devoid of real humor, and he shook his head like I just said something incredibly naive, incredibly stupid. "You say that now," he replied, "but wait until Lucas is older. Wait until he asks why he couldn't go to Harvard like his friends, why he can't travel the world, why he has to worry about student loans and job security, while other kids his age are living off trust funds and family connections. And then tell me that love is enough, that your pride is worth more than his future. The words struck a nerve, hit on fears I'd had in the darkest hours of the night when I couldn't sleep, when I worried about whether I was enough, whether I could give Lucas everything he deserved, whether my love and dedication could really compensate for the material advantages other children had. And Marcus saw that flicker of doubt cross my face, saw the crack in my armor, and he pressed his advantage like the skilled negotiator he was. "I'm not trying to take him away from you," he said, his voice reasonable now, almost kind, the voice of someone making a generous offer rather than issuing an ultimatum. "I'm proposing a compromise, a way for Lucas to have both worlds, the love and attention you provide and the opportunities and resources I can offer. We could work together, co-parent, share custody, in a way that benefits everyone, especially him." I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that maybe there was a way to navigate this impossible situation that didn't involve lawyers and court battles, and my son being torn apart by adults who couldn't put aside their differences. But I knew, deep in my gut, that this wasn't a real offer, wasn't a genuine compromise. It was a trap, a way for Marcus to get his foot in the door, to establish a relationship with Lucas that he would gradually expand until I was pushed out entirely, replaced by the better life he could provide, the life he thought Sarah should have chosen instead of running away with a nobody barista who couldn't give her anything except love. "I need to think about it," I said, buying time, trying to figure out my next move, trying to understand what Sarah would have wanted me to do in this situation. And Marcus nodded, pulled out another business card, pressed it into my hand with more force than necessary. "You have my number," he said. "Call me within 48 hours, or I'll assume you're not interested in compromise and we'll proceed through legal channels. And I promise you, Daniel, you don't want that. You don't want your entire life exposed and examined and judged by strangers who will be very interested to know about your financial situation, your work history, your ability to provide for a child on your income." The threat was clear, unmistakable, and I felt anger surge through me again, hot and bright, because this man, this stranger, had the audacity to question my fitness as a parent when he didn't know anything about me, about the sacrifices I'd made, about the sleepless nights and endless worry and unconditional love I'd poured into raising Lucas, about the way I'd put my own dreams on hold to make sure my son had everything he needed. I turned away without another word, took Lucas's hand and walked toward our car, my legs somehow carrying me even though I felt like I was moving through quicksand, through a nightmare that kept getting worse with every step. And behind me I heard Marcus call out, "You can't run from me like Sarah did, Daniel. I'll find you wherever you go. I have the resources to track you to the ends of the earth if necessary, so don't waste your time or mine trying to disappear." I didn't look back, didn't acknowledge his words, just kept walking, kept moving forward. And Lucas, bless his innocent heart, started chattering about the flowers we'd left at Mommy's grave, asking if she could see them from heaven, asking if she knew we visited her every month, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire future had just been called into question, that forces beyond his understanding or control were now in motion that could tear apart the only life he'd ever known. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts and fears and desperate plans, trying to figure out what to do, who to call, how to protect my son from a man who had unlimited resources and no scruples about using them to get what he wanted. And I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Marcus's car following us, or private investigators taking photos, or lawyers serving me with papers, because paranoia had set in, the terrible awareness that I was being watched, that my every move was being documented and analyzed and judged. At home, I went through the motions of our normal routine, made Lucas lunch, put him down for his nap, cleaned the kitchen, but my hands were shaking, my mind was elsewhere, and I kept pulling out Marcus's business card, staring at it like it was a poisonous snake that might strike at any moment. And I thought about Sarah, about the fear she must have felt knowing her father was looking for her, about the reasons she'd stayed away, about the warnings she'd given me that I hadn't fully understood until now. That night after Lucas was asleep, I did something I'd never done before. I went through the box of Sarah's belongings that I'd saved, the small collection of items she'd left behind, photographs and letters, and a journal she'd kept during our time together. And I read it, read every word, and what I found there broke my heart all over again, but also gave me strength, gave me clarity, gave me the understanding I needed to make the decision that lay before me. Sarah had written about her father extensively, about his controlling nature, his belief that money could solve any problem and buy any outcome, about the way he'd tried to orchestrate every aspect of her life from the moment she was born, choosing her friends, her schools, her activities, her future, never asking what she wanted, what she dreamed about, who she wanted to become, and she'd described the suffocating weight of his expectations, the constant pressure to be perfect, to represent the Wellington name with dignity and grace, to never embarrass the family or step out of line or show any weakness that might be exploited by business rivals or social enemies. She wrote about the incident that had finally driven her away, a business deal her father had made that involved displacing hundreds of low-income families to build a luxury development, and how she'd confronted him, begged him to reconsider, to find another location, to show some compassion for the people whose lives would be destroyed. And he'd looked at her with cold eyes and said, "Business isn't about compassion, Sarah. It's about profit. And those people are acceptable collateral damage. They're not our concern. They're not our responsibility." And she'd realized in that moment that she couldn't be part of his world anymore, couldn't live with the knowledge that her comfortable life was built on the suffering of others, couldn't reconcile the values he'd taught her in church on Sundays with the ruthless decisions he made in boardrooms on Mondays. She wrote about meeting me, about how I'd made her laugh for the first time in months, about how I'd looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered beyond her last name and her inheritance, about how she'd fallen in love with my kindness, my authenticity, my simple dreams of building a life based on love and integrity rather than money and power. And reading those words, I cried, because I'd loved her so much, had missed her so much, and now I understood why she'd kept me separate from her family, why she'd been so afraid when she got pregnant, why she'd left and then come back, why she'd made me promise to protect Lucas from her father. The journal's final entries were written during her illness, when she knew she was dying, and she'd written directly to Lucas, messages meant for him to read when he was older, explaining her choices, apologizing for not being there to watch him grow up, telling him how much she loved him, how proud she was to be his mother even if their time together was brief. And she'd written about me too, about how grateful she was that I'd never given up on her, that I'd loved her through everything, that I was the best father Lucas could have, the only person she trusted to raise him with love and values and strength of character. Don't let my father poison you with money, she'd written in an entry dated 2 weeks before her death. Don't let him tell you that what you and Daniel have isn't enough, that you need more, that you deserve the Wellington life, because that life comes with strings attached, with expectations and obligations, and the constant pressure to be someone you're not. And I want more for you than that. I want you to grow up free, to make your own choices, to value people over profit, to measure success by the love you give and receive rather than the zeros in your bank account. I closed the journal, held it against my chest, and felt Sarah's presence so strongly it was like she was in the room with me, guiding me, giving me the courage I needed to do what had to be done. And I knew, with absolute certainty, what my answer to Marcus Wellington would be. The next morning I called the number on his business card, and his assistant answered, "All professional efficiency," and I left a message saying I wanted to meet, to discuss his proposal. And within an hour he called back personally, his voice smooth and confident, already assuming he'd won, that I'd seen reason, that I was ready to compromise, and I let him believe that, agreed to meet him at his office downtown, in the sleek glass tower that housed Wellington Global Enterprises, because I wanted to see his world, wanted to understand exactly what Sarah had run from, what she'd sacrificed, what she'd protected Lucas from. The building was impressive, all marble and glass and expensive art, with security guards and receptionists and an atmosphere of wealth and power that was almost oppressive, and I felt completely out of place in my jeans and button-down shirt, carrying Lucas, who was dressed in his favorite superhero t-shirt, and the looks we got from the employees we passed in the hallways were a mixture of curiosity and disdain, like we were specimens from another world, interesting but ultimately not, belonging in this rarefied environment. Marcus's office was on the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. furnished with antiques and original artwork that was probably worth more than I'd earn in 10 years. And he greeted us warmly, all smiles and grandfatherly charm, offering Lucas candy from a crystal bowl on his desk, asking about his interests and his preschool, trying to establish a connection, trying to make my son comfortable, and I watched it all with a sick feeling in my stomach, because I could see how easy it would be for Lucas to be seduced by this, by the attention and the gifts and the promise of a life where he never had to worry about anything. "I've been thinking about your offer," I said once Lucas was settled in a corner of the office with some toys that Marcus had somehow procured, expensive educational toys that were probably designed to stimulate young minds and develop critical thinking skills. Nothing like the second-hand action figures and hand-me-down books we had at home. And I wanted to see your world, to understand what you're offering, before I make my decision. Marcus nodded, looking pleased, and he launched into a description of everything he could provide for Lucas, the schools he could attend, the tutors and coaches and mentors who could help him reach his full potential, the travel opportunities and cultural experiences and social connections that would open doors throughout his life. And it was seductive, I had to admit. The vision he painted of a future where my son had every advantage, every opportunity, where money was never an obstacle and the world was his for the taking. "But there's something you need to understand," Marcus said, leaning forward, his expression serious now. "The Wellington name comes with responsibilities, expectations, a legacy that Lucas would be expected to uphold and continue. He would need to learn our ways, our values, our approach to business and life, and that would require significant time spent with me, with his family, learning what it means to be a Wellington, and I'm not sure that's compatible with the values you've been teaching him, the simple life you've been living. So something would have to give, compromises would have to be made." And there it was, the truth beneath all the generous offers and reasonable-sounding proposals, the real agenda that Sarah had warned me about. Marcus didn't want to share Lucas. He wanted to shape him, mold him into a proper Wellington heir, erase the influence of his father who didn't understand the importance of money and power and social status, and create a grandson in his own image, someone who would carry on the family business and the family legacy without the inconvenient conscience that had driven Sarah away. "I appreciate your honesty," I said, standing up, moving toward Lucas, preparing to leave. "But I think I have my answer now, and it's no, we're not interested in your money or your world or your version of Lucas's future, because Sarah left all of that behind for a reason, and I'm going to honor her choice. I'm going to raise our son the way she wanted, with love and integrity and freedom to become whoever he wants to be, not whoever you think he should be." Marcus's expression hardened, the grandfatherly mask slipping to reveal the ruthless businessman underneath, and he stood up, his voice cold and threatening. "Then you've made a very foolish decision," he said, "and you'll regret it when my lawyers tear apart your life, when they question every choice you've made, every friend you have, every dollar you've spent, and when the judge awards me custody because I can provide a stable, wealthy home while you're struggling to make ends meet." I picked up Lucas, held him close, and looked Marcus Wellington straight in the eye. "Do your worst," I said, "because I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of your lawyers or your money or your threats. Sarah taught me that some things are more important than wealth or comfort or security, that integrity and love and staying true to your values matter more than anything else, and that's exactly what I'm going to teach Lucas, no matter what it costs me." I walked out of that office with my head held high, with Lucas chattering in my ear about the cool building with the pretty windows, completely unaware of the battle lines that had just been drawn, the war that was about to begin, and I felt scared but also strangely calm, because I knew I was doing the right thing, the thing Sarah would have wanted, the thing that would protect our son from becoming just another Wellington heir, molded and manipulated and ultimately unhappy like his mother had been. The legal battle that followed was brutal and exhausting, exactly as Marcus had promised. His lawyers filed for custody, claimed I was an unfit parent because of my limited income, my lack of family support, my inability to provide Lucas with the advantages he deserved as a Wellington heir, and they dug into every aspect of my life, questioning my friends, my employers, my parenting decisions, trying to find something, anything they could use to paint me as negligent or irresponsible or unsuitable to raise a child. I fought back with everything I had, hired a lawyer I could barely afford, gathered character references from teachers and neighbors and parents of Lucas's friends, documented every moment of our life together, every way I'd cared for him and loved him and put his needs before my own. And slowly, painfully, the truth began to emerge. Not the truth Marcus wanted the court to see, but the real truth about what kind of father I was and what kind of life I'd built for my son. The turning point came when the judge ordered a home visit, sent a court-appointed evaluator to spend time with us in our tiny apartment, to observe our daily routine, to see how Lucas and I interacted, and I was terrified, convinced that our modest home would be seen as inadequate compared to what Marcus could offer. But the evaluator was kind and thorough, and she watched us make breakfast together, saw how Lucas helped me crack eggs and mix pancake batter, laughing and talking and completely comfortable, and she observed our bedtime routine, the stories I read, the songs I sang, the gentle way I tucked him in and told him I loved him, and she saw the walls covered in his artwork, the shelves full of library books, the evidence of a life filled with love and creativity and simple pleasures. Her report to the court was glowing, describing a warm, nurturing home environment where the child was clearly thriving, where the father was attentive and engaged and deeply bonded with his son, where love and security were abundant even if material wealth was not, and she recommended that custody remain with me, that Marcus be granted visitation rights but not the primary guardianship he was seeking. And when I read that report, I cried with relief, cried with gratitude, cried with the overwhelming emotion of someone who'd been fighting for months and finally had a victory. The judge agreed with the evaluator's recommendation, ruled that Lucas would stay with me, that he was happy and healthy and well cared for, that blood relationship and financial resources alone were not sufficient reasons to disrupt a stable home and a strong parent-child bond. And Marcus's face when the verdict was read was a mixture of shock and rage, and I knew this wasn't over, that he would appeal, that he would keep fighting, but I'd won this round, and that was enough for now. In the months that followed, something unexpected happened. Marcus did appeal, but he also reached out, asked if we could talk, just the two of us without lawyers present, and against my better judgment I agreed, met him at a neutral location, a park where Lucas and I often played, and he looked different, older somehow, tired and sad, and he told me something that changed everything. "I've been reading Sarah's letters," he said quietly, pulling a stack of envelopes from his jacket pocket, and I recognized Sarah's handwriting on the addresses, letters she must have sent to him over the years, letters he'd apparently kept. She wrote to me every few months, even after she left, trying to explain her choices, trying to make me understand why she couldn't live the life I'd planned for her, and I never responded, never acknowledged them because I was angry and hurt and convinced she was making a terrible mistake. He looked at me with eyes that were suspiciously bright, and I saw genuine regret there, genuine pain. I read them all last night, really read them, not just skimmed them looking for ammunition to use against her. And I finally understood what she was trying to tell me, that she didn't leave because she didn't love me. She left because she loved herself more, loved the person she was becoming more than she feared disappointing me. And she was right. I was controlling. I was manipulative. I did try to turn her into something she wasn't, and I lost her because of it. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know if this was genuine or just another manipulation, another tactic in his campaign to get custody of Lucas. But something in his voice, in his posture, in the way he held those letters like they were precious, made me think that maybe, just maybe, he was being sincere. "I don't want to make the same mistake with Lucas," Marcus continued. "I don't want to lose my grandson the way I lost my daughter. I don't want him to grow up hating me or fearing me or running from me the way Sarah did. And I'm starting to realize that maybe you were right. Maybe love is more important than money. Maybe being there matters more than providing material advantages. Maybe I need to learn from you instead of trying to replace you." We talked for hours that day, really talked about Sarah and Lucas and the future, about what it meant to be a parent versus what it meant to be a provider, about mistakes and regrets and the possibility of starting over. And slowly, tentatively, we began to build something new. Not a friendship exactly, but an understanding, a truce, a willingness to put Lucas's well-being above our own pride and our own agendas. Marcus dropped the appeal, agreed to supervised visitation once a month, and over time, as Lucas got to know his grandfather, something beautiful happened. Marcus softened, became more human, more vulnerable, more willing to admit when he was wrong. And Lucas, with a child's wisdom and openness, accepted him without judgment, loved him without conditions, taught him by example what Sarah had tried so hard to teach him with words, that love and acceptance matter more than control and perfection. Now a year later, I'm standing at Sarah's grave again, but this time I'm not alone. Marcus is with us, and he's placing flowers next to the ones Lucas and I brought, white lilies that were her favorite, and he's talking to her, telling her about her son, about how smart he is, how kind, how much like her, and he's apologizing, saying the words he never got to say while she was alive, and I see tears running down his cheeks, and Lucas is holding both our hands, connecting us, bridging the gap between two worlds that Sarah tried so hard to keep separate, but that have finally found a way to coexist. Have you ever experienced something that completely changed your perspective, that challenged everything you thought you knew about people and relationships and what's possible when you're willing to be vulnerable and open to growth? That's what this journey has been for me, from that first shocking encounter at the cemetery to this moment of tentative peace. And I've learned that sometimes the people we fear the most are also the people who are hurting the most, that everyone has a story and a reason for their choices, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean releasing the poison of anger and resentment so we can move forward into something better. Lucas is 6 now, thriving in first grade, happy and secure and surrounded by love, and he knows his mother through the stories we tell him, through the journal she left him that he'll read when he's older, through the values she instilled in me that I'm passing on to him, and he also knows his grandfather, who has become an unexpected but important part of our lives, who has learned to listen instead of dictate, to suggest instead of demand, to earn love instead of trying to buy it. Understanding content like this is so important because it reminds us that family is complicated, that wealth doesn't equal happiness, that the greatest inheritance we can give our children isn't money, but values and love and the freedom to become themselves. And if this story has touched your heart, if you've ever struggled with difficult family dynamics or worried about protecting your children from harmful influences or wondered if you're doing enough with limited resources, please leave a like on this video. It helps more people find these stories and reminds us all that we're not alone in our struggles. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between family obligation and protecting someone you love? Have you ever been judged for your parenting choices by people who didn't understand your situation? Share your experiences, your wisdom, your support for others who might be going through similar challenges, because that's what community is about, lifting each other up, sharing our stories, finding strength in our shared humanity. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real experiences from real people navigating the complexities of love and family and difficult choices, please subscribe to Through My Eyes. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story, because every week we bring you narratives that will make you think, make you feel, make you see the world through someone else's perspective. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening to my story, for walking this journey with me, for understanding that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight for love, and that victory doesn't always look like we expect it to, but it's sweet nonetheless, when we stay true to our values and trust that doing the right thing will ultimately lead us where we need to be.